Hey, y'all, welcome to the podcast this week. I'm talking to Jeremy Stacy. Jeremy has played with everybody on the planet. Sheryl Crow, the Finn Brothers, Sia, King Crimson, Ryan Adams. I'm reading. The Rhythmics, Chris Robinson, Joe Cocker, the Black Crows, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Chris Squire from Yes, 07, Noel Gallagher for ages. You get the idea. He's an incredible drummer. He's an incredible jazz drummer. He's an incredible rock drummer. And he also has a project that only plays in London here and there, a Steely Dan cover band that's I would really love to see someday. It's really great. Jeremy Stacy. I am now running a coaching business on recording drums. If you are a serious drummer and you want to learn to record album quality drums in your home studio and you need coaching, I am offering a program for recording drums and getting really good sounds in any home studio environment that you are in. You can sign up for coaching calls. They are free. The link is here on YouTube, or you can go to my webpage, www.blairsinta.com, go on the coaching call, check out the video, and if it's something that you're interested in, you can book a free call with me and have a chat about it. Enjoy Jeremy Stacy. He's a great dude. I've hung with him a fair amount over a number of years, and he's just a lovely dude, and this is a lot about his history, and he has an incredible amount of gear. And really just understands recording, has actually recorded with Glyn Johns, understands that process. We talk about that in here. All right, Jeremy Stacy, recording drums.
You know what, I think that's the thing is, because of this incredible, I still find it amazing, the whirlwind of years of pretty much non-stop work that I've had, which I have no idea how that happens. I really don't know. People say, how do you get this? How did you? I've got no. I don't know. I never considered myself a big networker. I mean, I like getting on with people. I like hanging out, and I like talking to musicians, and I like talking to artists about.
I think it's like when you're here, you're like around. You know what I mean? Like
I want to see people, and I want to see. Yeah, I want to see what people are up to, what people are doing, and it's not a sort of like I mean, I've never expected to work as such, and I didn't. I mean, my 20s was a very quiet time. I didn't really make a sort of things didn't really happen for me till I was 30. And I'm 60 this year, so it's it's been it started and it didn't stop, and I never knew that it was going to carry on. It just carried on, and I have no idea how it works. I mean, I have so many young. How do you get into this? How do you do this? How do you become pass? Don't know.
There's always a transition period, right? You were Crimson for a long time, and then
that was 5 years. But I mean, in a funny sort of way, I think I did Noel for 6. I did Sheryl for 10, on and off.
You really?
Well, I started working with her in the studio in 99.
Okay, right.
And I was in the band, till 2010. And there was I worked with her in the studio for a bit. Then we had a little disagreement, couple of little disagreements, and as these things, and the next minute I was out, and then I started working with Chris Robinson with New Earth Mud.
Right.
So I was still in America for 2 years with him, and then I went. That's right. She was working with Sean Pelton at the time, but of course Sean was having commitment problems with her with Saturday Night Live, and suddenly he couldn't do. I think it was a European 3-week leg, and they were like, "Oh, let's get that guy in Europe. Let's get that English guy to step it." So after, I think I worked with her for about 2 years in the studio. I got a call back to go back and just do this 3 weeks, and that 3 weeks turned into 7, 8 years. Which was
And I saw you.
amazing.
I saw you at the Greek with her.
Did you? Oh, when was that? Do you think?
I don't know. I
That
feel
must
like
have been.
2008. Does that seem right?
Was John Button playing bass?
Button. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been the later. Yeah, that was the later period, because it was 2003. I got back with her, but then of course she took a year off, or almost a year and a half,
Right.
because she was dating Lance Armstrong and just wanted a break. And then of course I don't know how that happened. I managed to get the Finn Brothers gig.
Right.
So in between, it was like Cheryl, Chris Robinson, Cheryl, Finn Brothers, Cheryl. So I had a 10-year period, and of course the Finn Brothers were in the state where the first tour was an American tour, and then we went to Australia quite a lot with them.
So I thought that you played on Try Whistling This, but then I was looking at the credits.
No. I never recorded with Neil or Tim. I never did any recording. It was literally, I think, I'm trying to remember what was the reason that I got. I remember what happened. I was with Tim Smith, who I'm sure Tim Smith, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm sure they all know, was in Jellyfish, and I met him years ago, and he's kind of responsible for me even playing with Cheryl, as was Mitchell Froome, because I was in a band, the Lemon Trees, and Jellyfish. We opened for Jellyfish, we opened for Suzanne Vega, and both Mitchell and Tim recommended me to Cheryl, and I didn't get the gig.
Faulkner too, opening for Jellyfish.
No, Faulkner wasn't in the band then.
Oh,
I met
Faulkner.
I met Faulkner because Lemon Trees had their record mixed. The first record was mixed by Jack Puig, and then the second record was produced and mixed. The second record, which never came out, was produced by Jack Joseph Puig, and I then happened to be I was on tour with a band called Denzel, which was, I can't remember why I ended up doing that tour. That was a very sort of, all in the back of the van. It was a really rough tour. And I was in LA and ended up meeting this female artist who wanted to do a record. And I did the record at Sunset Sound, and Mitchell, the way these things just happen. And then the last day of that record, Jack had found out that I was in town and asked me to come and play on a track that Jason had also played on. And Jason was there, and I'd met Jason once, but we just said hello. And I came in and did the session. It was for Susanna Hoffs.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, Jack called me at midnight and said, "I need drums at Ocean Way now," like a crazy guy. And so I went in and did the track, and Jason was there, and he just played drums. And I think they kept some of his drums, kept some of my drums, one of those. And but Jason was like, "Man, I love it. What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "Well, I'm going home the next day." He said, "Right. Can we just go to a rehearsal room and play?" I was like, "Sure," and we did. And then I ended up doing the Author Unknown, which was his first record. I did some gigs with him.
I saw one of
with Levita.
Yeah,
with Dave Levita.
Yeah, I saw you.
That was the funniest. That was the funniest thing. Is I remember all these bass players were auditioning, all these guitarists were auditioning, and suddenly Dave Levita walks in the room, who I'd already been in the band with, and that was just so fun. And then Levita just nailed it, and there we have it. So sorry, this always happens with me. The stories. So the Finn Brothers, I was Tim Smith, who was in Sheryl Crow's band, and Jellyfish, and Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds.
Mm-hmm.
Tim and I were on Brooklyn Bridge going into New York, and I got a call from, oh yes, Alec, who is the one of the co-managers of Oasis, and of course my brother had been in Oasis.
Oh, I didn't know.
And Alec called me and said, would you be interested in playing with Neil and Tim Finn? And I went, yeah, of course. He said, well, I've put you and your brother forward for it. And they're working with Mitchell, and Mitchell's put your name forward. And there was an A&R man who had, and they were working at Bob Clearmountain's, who Paul and I also had worked with. So we were kind of already, and then they were like, we need.
Was Clearmountain in LA then, or still in New York?
Yeah, he was still in Pacific Palisades, I think. That then, yes, he was, because we went. I actually had to go over there. Okay. I went and met. The first thing was meeting Neil and Tim at Bob's house, and then I went and did an audition at Mitchell's studio. So, it's just kind of. I mean, I say audition. It was just a little. We just played 2 or 3 songs.
Did you? And have you worked with Chad Blake a lot?
I've never worked with Chad Blake. Even though Can you believe that?
Oh wow.
He's mixed 2 records I've played on, but I've never actually been in a studio with him and worked with him. No. Wow. And I would love to. It's funny because he was, coming from England, particularly at that time in the early 90s, the whole recording process had changed in the UK because it had gone SSL, everybody was using Atari computers. Mm-hmm. The whole old school way of recording had gone. And I didn't even know, I mean, I'd done a bit of recording in the 70s and 80s, but by the time I was established in any way in the UK, and I was never hugely established as a recording session drummer in the UK first, strangely. The recording process had gone, and I'd go to studios and go, these drums sound, I didn't know anything about recording techniques, but I knew I didn't like the sound very much. And then I remember I did a record with Stuart Levine, who sounds familiar. I think he did the Crusaders records, but then he also did Simply Red, and so American producer came over and he brought this engineer over, and I was working at Rack Studios, and I was like, wow, this sounds amazing, This I couldn't believe my drum sound. It was, and there was an API at Rack, but again, I think technically everybody in America, particularly in Los Angeles, had maintained an old school approach to recording. Recording live as a band, one thing which had stopped in the UK. Everybody was drums first,
Are you talking late 80s?
Yeah, late 80s. By that point, you'd go in as a drummer on your own and play the drums.
Make crazy 80s drum sounds.
And you'd spend a day working on the bass drum set, I mean, I worked with Gus Dudgeon quite a lot. I did many sessions with Gus Dudgeon, and it was, I was very lucky to do it, and he was great. But he had already got into that mode of, and it would be, can you try 8s on the hi-hat? Okay, can you try just 4 chord notes on the hi-hat? And, okay, maybe on the bridge go to 6, it was basically everybody got into drum machines, and drummers needed to be programmed.
Right.
So
I feel like that happens now, actually, with people, younger people coming from home studios. You know what I mean? They're like, wait, they act as if you're being programmed. Some people.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just the times and whatever, and that's what I was used to. And then suddenly I'm working, I did the Stuart Levine session, and that went incredibly well. And he actually, I was really taken by, this is a studio I go to all the time, and this sounds better. Why? Why is that sounding better? And then I got to work with Jack, and that was just like, I mean, first of all, the first thing I did I'd never been to Los Angeles, and I went in '92 because Lemon Trees went out to do a video,
Okay.
and also to meet Jack, who was mixing just one song of our records. It was like a tryout thing. And I just walked into Ocean Way, and I just never, I mean, Jack's room at the time was just like a Aladdin's cave, and I'd never seen anything like it. And then, of course, he came to London, and we started off at Rack Studios, and he bought all these microphones, and he'd like have a watering can with a mic in it, and all just all these things that I'd never seen. And then I walked into the control room after I'd done a take and just went, oh my God, what is this sound? So that started the whole fascination with it's not just drumming. You've got to be aware of the sound. And I'm not saying actually now, I would say that there's a mixture of, I mean, I've done sessions where people get the sort of strangeness of sound, and then you go, actually, that worked great. I'm not, it doesn't have to be a perfect sound anymore for me to think that it's the right thing. I mean, it's like you listen to old 70s drum tracks sometimes, and the drum sound might be not great, but it works perfectly within the music. So
is that so? At what point did you start to get into gear, since you're such a...
Well, Jack Puig, because I was with Jack Puig for 3 months, and I was going, well, what's that bass drum like? Oh, it's a D30. What's that?
Okay.
You don't know what a D30 is? This is what John Bonham used, and I'd be like, who's John Bonham? I'm into Lenny White.
Oh, that's not fucking true. Come on.
Well, no, but the weird thing is that it is true. I mean, I knew who John Bonham was, but I took my musical a way in has been the most bizarre, because music for me to start with was as a glam rock, really. Slade, The Sweet, T-Rex, Bowie. And then it became very quickly, before we knew it, it was punk. So I didn't get into the Pistols at that time, but I got into the Stranglers, and I got into the Jam, and all sorts of those sort of bands. Okay. And then suddenly, I met this drum teacher, and he brought Asia along, and a Bob James record, and Buddy Rich record, and a George Benson record with Harvey Mason. So at 13 years old, I was obsessed with Steve Gadd, Harvey Mason, Tony Williams, Lenny White, Billy Cobham, Buddy Rich, Andy Newmark, and not English drummers. I wasn't interested at that point. Then I went to a school later when I was 15, and everybody was into Genesis and Yes and Brand X and Bruford, and and so my whole early musical upbringing was jazz and fusion, completely, and early 70s fusion, not 80s fusion, which for me is it's a whole different thing.
That's when it went off the rails.
Well, let's hope that some of the 80s drummers aren't listening to this interview. But no, they didn't. I mean, but then I also, I did get into the 80s thing. It's funny because I remember I was one of the first drummers to get into Dave Weckl, because I went and worked on the ships when I was 21, which was 1984, in Miami for 5 months. And I went into a record shop, and I heard a Paquito de Rivera album, and I was going, who's this drummer? God, it sounds like Steve Jordan, Erskine, and I was already completely. And I was also into Vinny. I got into Zappa at that point, so I was into Vinny, Bodio.
Right.
But I was into Genesis, I was into Chester with Zappa as well.
Yeah.
So I was going, wow, who's this? And then I brought it back to London. I played some guys. They were like, wow, who's this guy? And then a year later, he was doing the Electric Band. So,
right.
And so that whole thing opened up. But I think my background really. I always feel like you get really influenced by the early drummers that
Sure.
and Harvey Mason, Andy Newmark, Steve Gadd, Billy Cobham, Lenny White, Tony Williams. Those were the people that I listened to, and I still love them all, immensely. But
That's
then
interesting to me because I remember hearing you with Cheryl and thinking like it it just had a very Bonham-esque like
well,
thing to it.
this
And so for you to say like not he wasn't an early influence to me, it seems crazy because it seems like part of your DNA. You know what I mean?
well, the weird thing is, I always say this is that it was because I'd had the drummers like the Slade
Mm-hmm.
and particularly the Sweet, the drummer from the Sweet. If you ever check him out, he's like, I mean, I always thought they wanted to be, Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. Mick Tucker was the drummer.
Okay.
He was a great rock. So it was in my DNA. It's just it was somebody copying Bonham, and then of course Phil Collins, because I was massively into Phil Collins. I was a Genesis fan, and Phil Collins is hugely influenced by Bonham and Ringo.
Yeah.
So I did have it, but I just wasn't listening. And it was the same with straight ahead jazz. I got into Tony, but I was into later Tony to start with.
Oh, right.
And then my twin brother, Paul Stacey, I know you've met Paul, haven't you?
Yeah, I've seen you guys play. Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul had really wanted to be a jazz guitarist, and he really got into jazz guitar. And he was actually getting pretty good. He was actually, at 15 or 16, he was being able to play change. I mean, we were late coming to it compared to, I mean, I think Americans, particularly because of the schooling, which we now have in England, but we didn't have back then. You just get to it by record. For me, it was listening to records. And so Paul got good, and then he joined the National Youth Jazz Orchestra. So we were going to London, and I was just terrified by all the drummers doing that. They were, they could sight read anything. There was an 11-year-old drummer, just playing like a big band drummer.
And his name was Gary Husband. No.
well, yeah. I mean, now there's somebody.
Could have been. Yeah.
Gary. I mean, it's just a phenomenon. Anyway. Yeah. So Paul started doing that, and then suddenly they were playing at Nebworth, and I remember that Steps Ahead were on, and I was like, great, Peter Erskine, fantastic, Don Grolnick, Michael Brecker.
Yeah.
So happy that those guys were playing. But then there was this other band, and it was Wynton Marsalis, and I noticed that there was a piano player, Kenny Kirkland, playing, and I'd heard him on I can't remember what record Paul and it was a Kazumi Watanabe record or something, but I'd only heard him through that.
Yeah.
So I watched the Wynton Marsalis band, and of course it was their first time over, and there's Jeff Tame Watts, and I was like,
yeah,
literally, I mean, I didn't understand what he was doing, or I didn't really know straight ahead drumming properly in any sort of way at that point. So I got into Wynton big time.
That was when Branford was still there, right?
It was Branford, Kenny, Charlotte Moffat, I think, to start with, Jeff Tame Watts. I mean, it was phenomenal. The first 3 records, particularly, but as you think of one I listened to a lot, that was the one I listened to a lot. Anyway, I became a fan.
Right.
And then I was playing, I was going on about it to people. I started playing with more straight ahead jazz musicians. They were saying, yeah, but you've got to check out all the others. You've got to check out where, you really know Miles and Coltrane. And I didn't, So somebody played me something at some point, and then it just the light went on. It's like, okay, so this is what Tony used to play like, which is kind of different from the VSOP period.
Probably the more natural progression for most people. It's not like everyone goes, okay, I want to learn jazz, I'm going straight to Louis Armstrong. It's like
no, I did. No, I just went the way I went, and it was all going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, which is still what I do. I mean, I don't have any, I still listen to some, I mean, I got completely obsessed with Sonny Payne for years. Somebody played me a video of Sonny Payne, and then it was just like, hang on a sec,
Yeah.
who is this guy? And somebody told me that Bonham was really into Sonny Payne, which actually really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if it's true, but
like so underrated, man.
I think he's literally one of the greatest drummers for me as far as swing. I think
exactly
swing feel is just amazing. His chops are amazing. His solo, his phrasing is. But then Sam Woodyard as well is another one who I really got into. But again, it was all going in different directions, which is kind of how I am in my life. I mean, I've got no sort of. I've always lacked discipline, to be honest, and there's no point pretending that I'm suddenly going to wake up one day and get it together. It's not the way it's not the way I do things. I mean, I just try and I just take in whatever's rocking my world at the moment and get into it. And,
right. So when JJ was talking about like microphones and things, did you just start to learn about them, or did you start to like buy recording gear?
I just started buying stuff, and then of course I met Mitchell with Suzanne Vega, and I listened to, I think it was 99.9 is the record of hers, and again my ear was starting to get attuned to this sound, and I was going, wow, what's this sound? This is different. I love this. So, and then I checked out Kiko, Los Lobos, and then I started just checking out all of Mitchell and Chad's records, and really got into that sound. But then, unlike anything, you start going all over the place, and then start checking out old records, and suddenly realizing the influences. Interestingly, I heard that Chad was always influenced by King Crimson. There's a King Crimson record that's one of his favorite, and he was commenting how the drums being slightly distorted and boxy, which probably wasn't
on purpose.
They probably weren't doing on purpose, but that's how it came out. That he liked that, and then started wanting to add that character to the sound that he was doing. So you didn't
have a place to take the microphones though. Would you take them to sessions, or you were just starting to collect, thinking like
I was starting to collect, and then it was I mean, it wasn't long after that I started getting into producing, and again I had no plan to be a producer, no plan to be an engineer. I just started grabbing stuff and messing around. I've always played keyboards, so I was trying to do demo things at home, and people would say, I want to write something, and I've always felt like I just facilitate whatever. If somebody called me today and said, right, we need to do a string arrangement on this, I'd go, okay, and I've done them. Am I any good at them? I have no idea. But if somebody says I need to get a string arrangement on this, I'll work out a way to do it. So that's kind of how I've always worked. A bit same with the keyboards. I mean, if somebody told me I was going to play keyboards with King Crimson, 20 years ago, I just would have laughed my head off.
Do you think that like playing keyboards like it has like influenced like drum sounds, like searching for sounds, like the relationship of like, okay, I need to be able to dial this or get this certain sound for a tune or for whatever. Do you think that would feed to like thinking?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? It's a bit like using samples sometimes. Like you'll do a sampled string track on something, and then you get the artist goes, right, I'm going to spend all this money, and they get a string section in, and they do it, and you go, well, it does sound like real strings. It sounds really good, but I kind of like I like the samples that I use, because the track has been developed around the sound as you're, I mean, this I think is a fascinating thing about just making music is we react to the sounds that we make at the time, which is why I always think that demos, then let's go and do it properly, can be a very dangerous thing, because what's properly anyway? I mean, what does that mean? It's just a case of everything in a track is developed around the sound that you're making as you go.
Right, that vibe.
Which same as recording, a band live. Right. Everybody's reacting in the moment to what's there, so they're going to play differently than if they play with a guy, guitar and vocal and a click. It's going to be completely different. So, right.
Yeah. So what?
Sorry.
So
should we just leave it there? I mean,
yeah, that's it. All right. Thanks.
There's just no hope.
Did you? So at what point did you get a space?
I was, a friend of mine said, "Oh, there's this rehearsal room, and they've got this space upstairs. It's like a room." And I'd got a place. I mean, I had this ridiculously small bed set because I didn't have much money when I was younger, and just my whole room was like, there's the wall of CDs, there's all this recording gear in the corner, and my bed was underneath the desk.
Right.
I remember I got an all-room desk, and I was sleeping under the desk, and then I had this little cupboard, and I managed to get a drum kit in there, and there was a whole house full of people. It was like it was like a hippie sort of commune or something. Right. And I was playing drums in the cupboard and doing tracks that way, and then it just got kind of out of control.
So that was like your early engineering. You were in like this little freaking.
Oh yeah. Wow. But something was occurring. I mean, I knew something, and this is what I listened to the demos that I did back in the day now, and I go, well, they've got something, because if they've got heart in them, then it'll translate. As far as I'm concerned, it's sometimes. I mean, I love great sounding records. There's no right. doubt about it. Right. But sometimes I love records that just don't sound that great, but have got great, they just got great soulful thing about them. So there's no rule. Go back to the thing, if there is just no rules. As soon as somebody goes, this is the way you do it, I just go, yeah, okay. Yeah. For you, maybe, but not
a certain character with maybe not being able to get to that point, but it has.
Yeah.
It has the emphasis of that, but it's not something new.
On the other hand, I love the thing of, I was doing a session with somebody one day, and they were going, "Oh, this is kind of like an Elvis-y thing," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And I have this particular Rogers power tone snare. And when I hit it, I just think, oh, it's kind of got the 50s thing about it. I don't know, that's not very specific, but it's just got this crack anyway. So I love the snare. So I brought it along, and I was playing, I put it up, and the guy was going, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that snare. I prefer that, snare you were using before." And I said, "Well, you asked me to bring something Elvis-y," and he said, "Oh, that doesn't sound Elvis-y to me at all." And I said, "Okay." So I walked into the control room, and I said, "Put this track." I told him to put a track on, and he put it on. And he listened. He went, "Oh my God, it sounds exactly the same." I went, "Well," he said, "Well, I still don't. I want the other snare." I said, "Okay, fine, but you asked for the Elvis snare. There it is." And I was surprised how close it was. Wow. And I think that's another thing that if you want to go searching for a sound, you can probably kind of work out. I mean, obviously it's impossible to copy something. You've got the drummer's touch, you've got the room, you've got the drums, you've got the heads, you've got, it just goes, it's endless. But I think you can.
You remember that day we spent like 3 hours playing K hi-hats? Does
But you did agree with me. That one set I've got, man.
God, dude.
Do you know what
I mean,
I
I've
think
never heard so many great sounding hi-hats at one time, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I spent, I went through periods where I was just obsessed with, I've got to find this sound. I've got to,
Yeah.
it's like once I realized that Gad was using a 16 ride, I started buying every time I saw a 16K of a weight that I thought was close, I'd buy it. And so, and I've got one that I think is pretty close. I've even got one that's got that little chip out of it. It's not the
Oh,
same,
yeah.
but
Right. So
did I ever tell you about that K? Sorry.
no, wait, hang on. I want to hear about that. Hang on. No, you tell me first. Go ahead. I'll remember my question. Go
Well,
ahead.
that set of K hi-hats that I played, remember I played them and I said, they're the closest to the Gad hi-hats I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So I was at Boston on tour with Crimson, and even though I'm not with Zildjian anymore, I'm still with Vic Firth. So I went and saw Joe Tester in Boston, and we went to the office, which is also the Zildjian office, and Paul was there at the time, still at that time, and we were, he was saying, well, I've got some of Gad's cymbals here. So he had the 16. So we actually got to weigh it, play it, and listen to it. And it's amazing how heavy it is, and how many cracks there are, how cracked and how dead it is. But as soon as you hear it, you go, oh, it sort of doesn't sound anything like, but you can tell that recording it would probably, in fact, Gavin Harrison did record it, and it does sound like you'd expect. Anyway, the hi-hats were there,
Okay.
and the weight of the top hat, which was the key to me for the sound, was 2 grams difference from the ones that I've got. I was 2 grams out. Wow. So I was pretty pleased. I thought that's not a bad guess for.
Do you use those when you do the Steely Dan gigs? Your
yeah
gigs? Yeah.
Well, I use them whenever I can. I don't use those K, even though I'm using the heavy one on the top, which is the same that apparently Steve Gadd does. I just don't use them for anything too rocky,
right?
Because obviously I don't want to break them. But any groove thing, there isn't any other. Actually, I've got 3 or 4 sets of hats. I've got some actually great Istanbul. Which ones are they? They're really, really good. I've forgotten which model it is, but I've actually got some really, really great. I'm very, very happy with.
At some point, I got to find out what that is.
Yeah.
So when you're doing a record with somebody, how like, I guess I get, the only word I can think of is like nerdy. Will you get with like, wait, these are not the right hi-hats or something, even though it may be a minimal difference? Do you get that minute, or is your meticulous ear, do you kind of let that go at a certain point?
Well, sometimes you have to, because you're at a session and going, set number 15 isn't here. I've and I mean, within reason, but I've got my set of, when I go to a session, I usually take, I don't know, 5 sets of hats at least. So I've got a brighter, heavier, I sort of like I have my Stuart Copeland hats, or I have my A's, just really good, not too heavy A's, which are a great sort of just for a lot of things. That I've got that set of K's, and some bigger ones, 15s or 16s or something. But I tend, I tend to find that those K's get on a lot of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Nowadays, anyway. So, but yeah, I get very nerdy. I don't talk to the engineers or anything about it. I just start changing stuff over, I had this lucky period for a long time where I was just working with people that didn't mind. I mean, there are a lot, I mean, I want to change the kit on every tune, probably.
Right.
Pretty much.
Right.
Or I've got a few techniques for sort of having like a dead bass drum with a boomy thing as well, so that I can, I try and make it so that I can compromise. But it's like, why? What? A guitar player's gonna change guitar, change pedals, change amplifiers. Why does the drummer not? Why is he not allowed to do that?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I and it really shouldn't take that long. I mean, it does amazingly, but I mean, obviously, especially if you've got the mics in position and hopefully the phase is all sorted. Hopefully, I mean, I always try and set up so that I can remove a bass drum fairly easily, and change out toms so that I can, so I can do it if I need to. But
I feel like most engineers, well, it depends on time frame and everything, but most engineers are amenable to.
it just depends on how much people are paying you.
Kind of true.
No,
it is.
Well, yeah, and no, I mean, what I mean is, I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me. I'll do what I can because I just enjoy.
I know what you mean. You're going to manipulate the sound either way, but if there's a bigger budget, there's more time, and obviously you probably have more gear there because you've been able allotted the budget to have more gear there, right? I mean, it all does go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, you've usually set up if you're doing a record. I mean, I've done things where I've got 3 kits set up.
Right.
So that I've got a kit in a booth and I've got a kit out in the room, and then maybe I've got a kit in the room that's screened off. So and then I do a sort of try and choose whichever one's convenient, based on. But again, you kind of got to have listened to the stuff beforehand and have an idea of what you're going for, and also, if there's going to be 14 musicians on the session, then that's going to be the last thing that an engineer and a producer wants. So at that point, I go, okay, it's one kit, and I'm just going to try and really clarify with the producer or artist or engineer what sort of like sound that they're thinking. And I don't mind people going, oh, we're going for a Ringo sound, or we're going for a whatever, anything to help, because it's never going to sound like any of those people.
Right.
I mean, this is what I've always said: is you can only be you. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to copy anybody, but I am influenced by drummers, and I'll think, okay, for this, as I think I've bored everybody to death with my approach to drumming, but I feel like I'm the casting director at the point pre the session where I'm going, okay, which drummer do you want? You want this drummer, okay, so it's going to be that, it's going to be that kit,
right,
and maybe a couple of other small options to choose from, and hopefully I've made the right choice. But I mean, that's what an actor would do. An actor would walk in and go, okay, I'm going to approach the character this way, and these are the choices I've made.
Yeah.
And and sometimes it just unfortunately sometimes it doesn't always work. But I think if you've done your homework and you know enough, hopefully, about the genre you're playing, you can be, I'd rather that. And yet, some of my favorite drummers, Steve Gadd, will turn up with his Yamaha kit and
just do him.
That's and I love that people do that too. I mean, it's I have got nothing. I don't think my way is the way. The way I do it is the way that I've ended up doing it for whatever reason. Probably because I can't hear my own personality in my playing. I know that sounds like a funny thing, but
I know I have a similar thing.
I don't know what my personality is in my playing. I just play what I try and play what I think's right for the music, and apparently I sound like me, but I don't know what. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can't
You can't hear yourself, but
I can't hear myself like that, in that context. And
part of yourself is the fact that you can do so many different things sonically and or stylistically. That is you, and that's as
it's part of my thing, yeah. And I don't want to. I don't. Yeah, I've never. It's like I want to. If somebody goes, right, we're doing an ECM record tomorrow, I want to sound like Jack DeJohnette and Jon Christensen, and that's I'm never going to sound like them, but I may bring some things along. I may bring an 18-inch flat ride along, and and a Sonal light kit or
that's not a personality. That's a vibe.
it's a vibe, exactly. But a lot of people wouldn't do that, and some people think it's nonsense. I know certain drummers who think that approach is nonsense, but
Sure.
They're entitled to do it that way. And as I say, a lot of my favorite drummers are stylized play. They bring their thing,
Right.
and they do it their way. And I'm the biggest fan of those drummers too. So
Yeah. Let's talk about Glyn Johns a little,
okay,
because you've told me stories, and I think it'd be cool for other people to hear. Just
right.
you know, um, my first question is: whenever you record with him, does he always use that miking technique, or doesn't? Is that
Yeah,
he does now?
yeah, he does. He's always used that three mic. I mean, he he has a snare mic on. It's like usually a 57 as a backup.
Okay.
And what's interesting, actually, if you watch Get Back, which I did intensely, I realized that there was 5 mics up.
Yeah.
And what I realized, but you see, this is the thing: is it's logical. I think Glyn was just being logical, which is Ringo's got a tea towel on his snare. So a tea towel on the snare, one, is going to bring the volume of the snare drum down massively, which means that the hi-hats are going to be louder. And so if you've got your overhead, and I noticed that Glyn's overhead is lower now than at that point than he does now. So at that height, you're going to get not as much snare as hi-hat. So having the snare mic there meant that he has the ability to turn this, even though it's padded down. Because I've found that it's like, even like if you've ever used those, those circular rings, what they call the big one, fat snare.
Big fat snare. Yeah.
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 I mean, you put one of those on, and the volume, the actual volume of the snare decreases quite massively.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's your snare mic, which with Glyn it is,
mm-hmm.
then and you start laying into the hi-hats, you're gonna notice it.
Yeah.
But I also noticed there was
something, right? You've told me.
Sorry.
He'll say something, right? Like if
he
he's
will,
not getting it,
he will.
He'll say.
He always said to me when I was doing tracking, he said, try and look through the glass at me. He said, if the snare seems quiet, I'll just go, I'll make some sort of signal to mean hit the snare a bit harder.
Okay.
Which is
awesome.
Awesome, yeah. Of course, he never did. No, I can't remember.
But
well, it was just the balance.
In
the balance was perfect.
In the Exile on Main Street documentary, which I'm guessing you've watched, it goes by fast, but there's some pictures of Charlie, and those mics are in strange spots, man.
Well, it might be Andy Johns, because not all of Exile is Glyn, is it? I don't think. I haven't watched the documentary. I've got to watch it, actually. I haven't watched it. It might be Andy.
Okay.
But it might be Glyn as well. Glyn, I mean, as I say, I saw Glyn. Glyn would sometimes come out and lower the mic, raise the mic up, move it over a little bit.
Okay.
It was, he's he didn't have a sort of, it's just that he's capturing the kit.
Yeah.
And you know, as he said to me at the time, it's like, if the drums sound shit, it's your fault.
Right.
As bluntly as that. It was
Fair
just like,
enough. If he's got a bunch
that's
of
very
7s
funny.
going through a Neve console, then it's your problem, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it really was. It's down to you to,
Yeah.
because there is no, you know, you've got no backup. And the same with the performance. You know, it was, you know, we didn't get, you know, we got one or two listens to the song, quickly scribble out a rough chart, and then go, and then it's like one or two takes, you know, maybe three. That's it. And you know, I mean that Ryan record I did with him. I mean, I mean, there's a bit where I go to the chorus early, or there's I don't know, there's just mistakes, and they're in. But after a while, you go, I can't. It's part of the performance.
Part of the song.
It's part of the song.
I mean, that's the shit that I miss these days. You hear that on Stones records or whatever. You're like, oh, wait, why did the ride cymbal show up 2 bars early?
Yeah.
Somebody blew
Well,
it.
you know, I had to play Gene Genie recently, and you know, the classic of, I can't remember who it is. I think it's.
Is that?
I don't think it's. Somebody it's 14 bars, and somebody goes, there's an extra bar. There's a confusion of when the chorus starts.
Right.
On the first chorus, and it's just. But the funny thing is, if you then perfect it, you sort of go, it's become part of the song.
Yeah.
But we can't. You know, you can't play it as a mistake, and then you can't play it. It's yeah, it's funny. Music is, and now everybody just wants to fix everything straight away. And I always say to people, yeah, maybe, okay, do what you want.
There's a part in Changes where I think I don't know. It seems to me like when they were mixing or whatever, they forgot to unmute the drums after a section because no one ever notices. But if you have to learn the song and you study it, you're like, wait, where are the drums? And then they just appear.
All right, okay, yeah.
You're like,
yeah, they probably just muted them. And,
you never notice, you know?
It's like, there's that Sly record, it's In Time, where you hear it sounds like the master fade is going down at one point, and then it just comes back up.
Somebody leaned on it.
It's like, well, no, somebody's thinking, oh, we'll probably end it. Oh, we did another chorus. Okay, yeah, we did another time round. Put the fader back up.
Have you ever met Andy Newmark?
I have many times, and I'm actually very good friends with Andy. He is a phenomenon. Just great person, great, just such a great drummer, such a huge fan. I think Andy's one of those unsung heroes, really, of mine, because I think he really is.
He's just
insane.
It's that Roxy Music stuff. It's insane. His feel
he is
insane, and then he'll just play this little like gaddy shit, and you're like, "What the fuck was that?" And then it's done, and he's just back to like being a fucking badass.
You should interview him, because you will hear the funniest stories. I mean, the stories he tells me about him and Rick Marotta, because Rick Marotta lived opposite they had an apartment opposite each other, and he said Rick was just going out the door every day working, and he wasn't. And then he told me a story about Rick putting him forward for a gig, and then he felt like he overplayed, and then Rick was like, "What are you doing?" You know, he because he's really into playing simply, Andy. And I just said, "Yeah, man," but I said, when you play busy, it's incredible. I just love your some of the weird beats that he comes up with. Well, In Time alone, but there's so many great tracks. There's a great Bob James 3. The first track on that record, his playing on that is phenomenal. And there's also a Freddie Hubbard record called Windjammer, and he plays on that. Just such an interesting beat and interesting way of playing, like nobody else. He's a real one-off, and funky as hell, and just so great sound, and I mean, he sounds like he hits hard, but I like that. Some you know, because I know everybody got into that thing. Particularly, I think the West Coast is more into the softer, lighter playing to get the sound, and I didn't have that down for years. I mean, I still have to remind myself because I came from a harder hitting background, and I watch myself sometimes and I just go, oh my god, I'm hitting the cymbals so hard, I cannot believe. And I never break cymbals.
I've been there.
Very rarely, and I rarely break sticks or skins.
Right.
But I look and I just go, oh my god, I'm just hitting so hard. And then you'll see, you know, I don't know, Jay Bellerose or Jim Keller or somebody,
Or
just
yeah,
or Joey Waronker. Yeah, there's a great example. Gets such a great sound, but you know, it's again, I don't have a set rule about any of that. I'll still play hard if it seems right, you know, whatever.
yeah.
Don't care.
Are you doing much stuff at home?
No, not really.
No.
No, I'm doing a lot of gigs. I'm doing lots at the moment because obviously Crimson's come to its final. That's it. Unless unless it starts up again. I mean, I did have a funny conversation with Bill Bruford about something about. I said, "Well, it's finished now," and he said, "Yeah, I think it finished 12 times while I was in the band." He was only in the band twice for a couple of years, so you know. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point we accept that it's done.
Okay.
So, but I've been doing a lot of jazz gigs, and a lot of gigs. There's a lot of cool, you know, fun gigs to go and play.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm going at. I feel like I'm 20 again. I'm out playing again. I'm doing jazz gigs and pub gigs, and it's still in a way my favorite thing. You know, club gigs, playing at Ronnie Scott's, playing at 606. It is my favorite thing because you just have that connection with the audience. You feel the audience there. There's always friends and musicians there, and it's just more. I don't know. You know, I've had this years of playing these huge gigs, but you don't. For me personally, I'm not talking. Maybe if you're the singer at the front, you know, it's a different feeling, but the connection is just not the same. So
yeah.
So I'm enjoying that. Obviously, it's very different. It's very different. I'm in a very different mode, and
but the recording thing at home is minimal. Is that mainly for you to produce things, or how do you think of?
Well, I'm lucky because I've got a setup at home at my place in the country. I've got a little cottage out in the country, and I have a room there where the drums sound pretty good, and I've done quite a lot of stuff there, and people, to my surprise, seem happy with it because it really is a tiny room. But I've also got 2 other studios where I've got recording gear, so I've got access to bigger studios. So if I need the big room, I can go and do it, and I'll just go, okay, 3 people want, you know, tracks with a bigger drum sound, so it's time to go here and do that. So I'm still able to do recording wherever, and yeah, and that's fun, and it's nice because I've still got all these drum kits, so I can go, and 2 of the places I go have a lot of my drum kits, so I'll just go, right, I'm coming in. This is what we're going to do.
Those engineer friends or producer friends or who?
Well, yes, yeah. There's a couple of studios that got, some of them got my recording gear as well, because I don't need, you know, I couldn't have all my recording gear. I've still got it all apart from the API console that I had, which I had to get rid of, which was painful. But you know, I've not had a situation where I could have used it, and I mean, unless you're, you know, a multi-millionaire with a massive complex with your own place. To be perfectly honest, having this crazy big studio is I mean, no, unfortunately, people don't care enough,
No.
and there isn't the music business is not set up for people. I mean, look, Ocean Way. We've lost Ocean Way. I mean, it just kind of says it all, really,
Right.
and it's very sad. But then I also go, well, it's sad, but it's just moved on to something else, and
Well, just it's actually still happening. It's very strange. Ocean Way is still there.
oh, is it?
There are still sessions happening. Yeah, I talked to an engineer, I don't remember who, the other day. There's still shit going on in there. So the rumors that came out, there is some truth to it. I think it has shifted, but there's still people in there. It's not destroyed or anything. There's still people.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Because that was like I went to the 55 bar in New York,
Yeah.
and I actually took a picture.
Yeah.
That was pretty devastating to see that place with everything ripped out and just go, how can that place have gone? I mean, that was just that was my favorite music venue in New York by a
When I
mile.
go to New York now and I think of like where am I going to go see music, and that of course still comes to my mind. I'm like,
So sad, so sad, and just the amount of amazing gigs that I saw in that place,
yeah, yeah.
And I'm not talking about the ones where I played.
Well, that's part of it too, though. But yeah, I know.
No.
Yeah, yeah. All right, man.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty yeah. That was a sad moment. But again, these things. I mean, I say you go to the Cavern Club in Liverpool, and it's not even the original. The Cavern Club in Liverpool's fantastic, by the way. I went there to see my friend, the drummer Chris Shark. He plays in a Beatles tribute band, and they're really good. And the place was amazing. It was really amazing, but it's not the original place. So yeah,
Shit changes, right?
it changes, it moves on.
Yeah.
We were all using Yamaha 9000s at one point with pinstripe heads.
Still a good sound.
I love it. But yeah, it's it's a different time. So, and I'm fine. I'm fine with things moving on. But yeah,
Yeah, there's some things that are a bummer.
Yeah.
I miss playing in music with people in a recording studio.
Well, you do it with people. Plus, you've got a deadline. Plus, everybody's got to. It's not a case of when you do it yourself. You can do it till you feel ready until it sounds good to you. But with the group of musicians, you've got to be ready quicker, and you've got to be you've got to be on the case, and there's that pressure,
Yeah, and
which we all like.
Yeah,
which we all like.
Urgency is like that. Like if I out here, I can play. If I mess up on a take, I go, oh, okay, whatever, I'll do another one. But like, there's a different focus when you're with people.
Yeah, if you mess up on a take with the other people, you're like, oh, yeah.
Exactly. Like shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What are you gonna do? It's kind of the way it is, out here.
No, it is. But maybe. I mean, I feel like. I mean, the whole thing has become so. I mean, it's so difficult over here now because we have. I don't want to start talking about Live Nation and all those. But the whole way that the system is now working, it's just crazy. I mean, musicians over here are not. I did something and I found the treatment so unbearable that I bailed out of. I had a gig that I could have done, and I just walked away from it.
Like a road thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I just thought I can't. I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna lose my shit here, and it's just best that I don't be around this.
I do feel like there's a dividing line between generations at this point because they're used to certain things and we're used to certain things, and it's not that we're snobs about it. It's just like, well, this is not right.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like this, but they don't know any better, so they accept
it. Yeah, no, it's true. It's absolutely true.
A lot of it's money.
Well, it's always back to the same thing. It's money and the distribution, and
Right.
it's yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'll cut any of this out if you say anything.
oh god, let's
Yeah.
stay on a. Let's try and, now, what else positive can we talk about the music business? Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, again, I consider myself incredibly lucky to have bypassed a lot of that, in the projects that I've been involved with, that that are not really on the normal. I mean, King Crimson was not on the normal. Was not a normal situation in any way. So
Right.
it was a very lucky thing to have done. And even though I found it very difficult, not musically, I found it challenging musically, but I found it challenging because of the situation of three drummers not really having freedom to everything was already set before I got there, so I had no freedom to play how I play, really. But then I got to on the keyboard, so it was.
Well, you say that. I mean, yes, I know you felt that, but yet when I saw you, it was definitely you were you.
Well, I can't. I mean, yeah, and I probably could have been more. I could have gone. I was just trying to find a way to make it work musically with the three of us. That was, and I think we did. I think we did. I think, yeah. But whether I was doing as I was told, that might not have been the case. Sorry, Gavin. Sorry. It
worked for me, man.
You know me.
No.
But I tried. But I had to be true to myself musically as well. But I think in the end it did work. I think it did. I think we made it work, and it sounded
that I think I expressed to you is that the fact that I think it worked so well because between the three of you guys, it sounded, you guys everybody had their own thing, and it was really starkly different in the best.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah, I think that was the thing.
The same, it would be like, well, what's the point?
Yeah, no, and I even as I say, the drum kit ended up being. I based my drum kit on what I thought would work with those two that were already, they'd already been doing the gig, and Bill Rieflin had used a different sort of sound, and I sort of started in a more Bill Rieflin sonic way, and I just went, I think for me it's going to work better if I get a different sound to these guys. Gavin's got a very perfectly tuned, sort of deeper, but it's sort of deeper, not as deep as but Pat's got more of a dead sound. So I just thought, well, I'm going to bring in the 70s. It's almost like a Tony sort of sound, like a 70s fusion, like much higher tuned. I tuned my drums much higher up, even though whenever I hear the recordings, it didn't sound like it, but they were cranked compared to the other two, and crank the snare up and go for a brighter thing, and set it up weirdly as well. I made it so that it was actually quite hard to play some of the patterns because I had the smaller tom there, but some of the patterns required the toms to go in an order, so I had to. But then it was great because it forced me to play it differently, and I actually changed the setup from one tour to another, so I had to replay everything completely differently.
Is there a proper video of any of those concerts?
Or where you can buy them, but there's a clip of the very last tune we played in Japan 2021, which is Starless. It's December 2021, and it's the last tune that we played. So there's that, and I think there's a version of Indiscipline on there as well. So yeah, there's a few clips. There's a few cool clips. I'll send you something if you want to.
Yeah, totally.
You can have a good old chuckle.
Man. Well, thank you for your time.
Is that it?
You want to keep going? We can keep going.
What time is it? No. I mean, I've probably got another 5 minutes or so. I've got to exit in about, I got about 7 minutes or something.
Fucking good.
Unless have we covered everything that you wanted?
Tell me about
Yeah, because I've got no gig to tell you about really. At this point, it's like, okay, well, this is.
Trying to think of something witty. Fucking. No, we're good, man. I mean, yeah. Thank you.
I'm glad we've done this, and I'm sorry it took me so long. And I'm not very good at this stuff. And well, it's not. I'm not good at.
The funny thing is, the last time we chatted on the phone, 6 months ago or whatever, we talked for like an hour, and I was like, well, fuck, like, if I could just hold up a recording to the phone and just get us bullshitting, you know what I mean? Yeah.
I always say I end up. I mean, this is the thing when I do interviews, I end up always saying the same stuff, and it's like, God, people must be just sick to death of. But I mean, what you could say? You've done it the way you've done it, and it hasn't. I haven't got unless there's some story that I've missed along the way. It's always going to end up being the same old thing, and nothing much has happened differently. Over the past year, because I just haven't been working so much. But I'm lucky. I'm still lucky. I'm still playing with great people, and I still do my Steely Dan thing, which I still enjoy doing. And
I hope I get to see that at some point.
Yeah, well, I'd love to bring it over, but there again, it's like taking 14 musicians to the States with the visas and the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just like, it's impossible, really.
I mean, you could obviously hire just separate people here, but that's a whole nother heavy lift, right?
I could get you to do it.
Oh.
And I can just stay at home and
there you go, contract it out. Yeah.
Contract it out. Yeah, exactly. No, I've considered that, but it is partly the personnel. We've got this great group of people who are phenomenal players, but they're just great friends as well. So we just have we have a really fun time doing it. So I would you never know. I mean, something could just happen, and maybe I can bring it out. But at the moment, I haven't worked a way to do that. So
for me, I'd like to see it there. I want to fucking be there somehow when it happens and see it.
Well, it usually happens in January every year. Beginning of every year, we do 4. I think we did 5 nights last time. Did we do 5? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. No, it was 4. 4 nights at Ronnie's every January. So start the year off. So
yeah. All right. Well, maybe I'll be there.
Come on, hop on over. Yeah. Well, it's great to see you, man. And well, I hope I get to come out to LA. I'm thinking of coming out socially at some point this year. So. All
right. Well, I know you'll hit me up, and we'll
I will.
Yeah.
Great, man.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
See you soon. Be good.
See you soon. Take care. See you.